Dylan Baskers had trained himself to feel nothing, until Samantha Wren stepped onto an auction stage 15 years after high school, and his heart slammed against his ribs so hard he forgot how to breathe, forgot every carefully constructed, forgot everything, except the realization that he'd never stopped wanting her to see him. The Metropolitan Charity Gala glittered with old money and older secrets. Dylan Baskers stood near the bar with calculated disinterest, his custom suit armor against a world that had once rejected him. Another evening of performative philanthropy. Before he could return to the solitude of building empires, the auctioneer's voice carried across the ballroom, cycling through lots with practiced enthusiasm. Dylan raised his glass without drinking, already calculating his exit. Then the auctioneer announced, "Lot number 9. Ladies and gentlemen, our next offering is an intimate dinner for 2 with Miss Samantha Wren, heiress to the Wren Foundation." The room's energy shifted. Dylan's hand tightened on his glass. He looked up. Samantha Wren stood on the auction stage in a silver dress that caught the light, her dark hair swept up, her smile nervous. She was thinner than he remembered, shadows under her eyes, but she was still. She was still the girl who'd made him feel worthless at 17. His heart kicked violently against his ribs. He was back in high school, scholarship student with wrong clothes and wrong accent, watching her laugh with friends who looked through him like he was invisible. He remembered her cutting comment about charity cases trying to play with real money that had gotten laughs and made his face burn with humiliation. The bidding started at 5,000. Society boys raised their paddles eagerly. Dylan watched Samantha's smile grow more strained with each increase, watched her hands clasped together, watched the proud tilt of her chin he remembered from hallways where she'd walked past him without seeing. Dylan's hand moved without conscious thought, raising his paddle. His throat went dry. 50,000, he said, his voice cutting through the murmur. The room went quiet. On stage, Samantha's eyes found his, and he watched recognition hit her, watched shock transform her features. She remembered him. Someone bid 60,000. Dylan raised his paddle again. 100,000. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The auctioneer's voice rose with excitement. Dylan felt everything he'd built. The control, the composure, the carefully constructed indifference. Crumbling. Another bidder tried 75. Dylan didn't let him finish. 200,000. Whispers crescendoed. Samantha stood frozen, her eyes locked on his with something that might have been horror. The auctioneer repeated, $200,000. Do I hear 225? Silence. Dylan raised his paddle one final time. $500,000. The room exploded into chaos. On stage, Samantha swayed slightly, and Dylan had the absurd urge to catch her. This woman he'd just humiliated for reasons he couldn't fully articulate. Sold. The gavel came down. Lot number 9. Sold to Mr. Dylan Baskers for $500,000. Applause erupted. Dylan set down his paddle with hands that wanted to shake. His awareness narrowed to her standing on that stage looking devastated and beautiful, and nothing like the careless girl from his memory. He'd won. So, why did it feel like he'd just made the worst mistake of his life? Samantha fled the stage, her face burning. The sympathetic glances were worse than the curious stares. They all knew the Wren fortune had collapsed, that her father's death had revealed debts hidden behind decades of appearances, that tonight's auction had been her desperate attempt to save his foundation, and Dylan Baskers had just turned her last shred of dignity into a spectacle. She locked herself in the powder room, gripping the marble counter, fighting tears. The memory surfaced unwanted. Dylan Baskers in their AP economics class, brilliant and awkward, his scholarship status an open secret. She'd laughed when Brad Mitchell mocked his presentation, had made a cutting comment about charity cases, that had gotten laughs and made Dylan's face flood with color. She'd forgotten about it by lunch. Clearly he hadn't. A staff member knocked. "Miss Wren? Mr. Baskers is waiting outside." Of course, he was. Samantha straightened her spine and walked out to face consequences. He waited near the service entrance, tall and composed in the city lights. When he turned at her approach, his eyes held intensity that made her breath catch, acute awareness of being truly seen. "Congratulations," Samantha said, forcing steadiness into her voice. "You've managed to humiliate me and look charitable doing it." Dylan's expression didn't change. "I wasn't trying to humiliate you. I was trying to help." Her laugh was sharp. "By spending $500,000? By making me a spectacle?" "The money goes to your foundation," Dylan said, his jaw tightening. "Yes." "Because I'm desperate," Samantha admitted, the words tasting like poison. "And you turned it into a reminder that Samantha Wren is for sale now." He took a step closer. Her skin warmed despite herself. He was taller than she remembered, broader, and standing this near made her acutely conscious of the heat radiating from him. "Consider it repayment," Dylan said quietly, "for old times." "You can't buy revenge with charity money," Samantha shot back. "Can't I?" His smile was slight. "I get closure. Your foundation gets funded. Except me." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise. That she remembered who he was. "You needed the money. I provided it." Samantha stared at this stranger wearing the face of the boy she'd dismissed. Her heart beat an unsteady rhythm. "We're both trapped in a moment we can't change, and you just spent $500,000 to prove it." His composure cracked. Something raw flashed across his features. "One dinner," Dylan said roughly. "That's what I paid for." He turned to leave. Samantha watched him go, every nerve ending alive in a way she didn't want to examine. "Dylan," she called out. He stopped, but didn't. "Turn. I was awful to you in high school. Thoughtless and cruel," Samantha said, swallowing hard. "If this dinner is what you need, then I'll show up." Dylan looked back then, his profile sharp against the city lights. "I don't want revenge," he said quietly. "I don't know what I want." Then he was gone, and Samantha stood alone, her borrowed dress suddenly too thin, her carefully constructed armor cracking. Her skin felt flushed despite the cool air. She remembered Dylan Baskers better than she'd admitted. Remembered his quiet intelligence, the proud tilt of his chin when classmates mocked his clothes. Remembered the day he'd stopped coming to their class. She'd broken something in him. And now he'd put himself back together, harder, sharper, and come back to show her exactly what she'd destroyed. Walking back through the gala, Samantha felt something that might have been dread, but felt disturbingly like anticipation. The restaurant Dylan chose was impossibly exclusive, Michelin-starred, the kind of place that required either 6 months' notice or his kind of influence. Samantha arrived exactly on time, armor carefully assembled. Dylan stood when she entered. Her breath caught, tall in a dark suit that emphasized his shoulders, eyes tracking her movement with intensity that made her acutely aware of every step. "Samantha," Dylan said, her name sounding different in his mouth, intimate, weighted. "You look beautiful." Heat crept up her neck. "You look like you're trying to intimidate me with restaurant choice." His smile was slight. "I reserved enough, space that we won't be overheard." They sat, and the small table felt impossibly intimate. Samantha reached for her water glass, using the moment to steady herself against the way his attention made her skin feel too warm. "So, what have you been planning?" Dylan asked. "For this evening?" "To endure whatever revenge fantasy you've constructed," Samantha replied. "Revenge fantasy," Dylan repeated, tasting the words. Is that what you think this is? The poor scholarship? Student who made good? Finally getting to make the rich girl squirm? That's not fair. Her throat tightened. You show up at my lowest moment and turn it into theater. The waiter appeared with wine Dylan had prearranged. They sat in tense silence. As glasses were poured, awareness humming between them. You're staring, Dylan said finally. You've been staring at me since I walked in, Samantha countered. I paid $500,000 for the privilege. The reminder made her chest tighten. She started to stand, but Dylan's hand shot across the table, not touching, just hovering. The near contact sent electricity through her. Wait. I'm sorry, Dylan said, the apology sounding rusty. That was cruel. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Samantha asked. Sit across from you without every 17-year-old feeling flooding back, Dylan admitted, his voice dropping. Without remembering how small you made me feel. The honesty disarmed her. I was terrible to you. Yes, he agreed simply. Now, I understand exactly how little my last name protects me, Samantha said, meeting his eyes. Now I know I was wrong about everything, including you. The silence stretched. Dylan turned his wine glass slowly, and Samantha found herself watching his hands, elegant despite their strength. Her mouth went dry. Why did you really bid on me? She asked finally. You're right. I don't do anything on impulse, Dylan said, pausing. Except that. Seeing you on that stage, I raised my paddle before I understood why. And then you kept raising it. Because somewhere between the first bid and the final one, I stopped trying to prove you were wrong about me, Dylan said, leaning forward slightly. Samantha's breath hitched at his proximity. I wanted you to be exactly what I remembered. It was easier. But you weren't. Her throat felt tight. What was I? Human. Scared and proud and trying to save something that mattered, Dylan said. His intensity, a physical force that made her heart race. Everything I'd convinced myself you were incapable of being. The admission hung between them, vulnerable. Samantha found herself leaning forward too, drawn by gravity she didn't understand, acutely aware of the small distance between them. I thought about you, she admitted, after high school, read articles about your success, and I wondered if you remembered me. Dylan's laugh was soft, painful. Samantha, you were the yardstick I measured everything against. Every deal, every success. Some part of me was thinking, would she see me now? The confession made her chest constrict. She felt heat blooming across her skin. This wasn't the revenge fantasy she'd braced herself against. That's incredibly sad, Samantha whispered. Yes. And terrifying because this isn't simple. No, Dylan agreed. It really isn't. Their food arrived. They ate mechanically, conversation shifting to safer topics, but underneath the surface something hummed. Samantha found herself studying details. The way Dylan's hands moved when he talked, the slight scar above his eyebrow, the way he listened as if her words actually mattered. Each observation made her more conscious of him, of the way her body responded to his presence without permission. When dessert came and went, Dylan walked her outside. His car waited at the curb. This was goodbye. Samantha looked at him one more time, her heart beating an unsteady rhythm. What you said about wondering. If you'd be worth my attention, you always were. I just wasn't looking. She walked away before she could watch how the words landed, her heels clicking against pavement, acutely aware of his gaze on her back, warm and intense. This should have been simple revenge. Instead, walking through Manhattan's night, Samantha admitted what she'd been avoiding. Dylan Baskers had become infinitely more dangerous than the boy she'd dismissed, because now she couldn't stop thinking about him. And her body seemed to know something her mind refused to admit. Dylan told himself he wasn't obsessing. He thought about nothing else. Not in the vengeful way he'd carried for years, but in a way that made his chest tight, his thoughts scattered. The way she'd listened when he spoke, the vulnerability underneath. Her pride that called to something protective he hadn't known he possessed. This wasn't supposed to happen. 2 weeks later, circumstance delivered what manipulation shouldn't. A scheduling conflict requiring his attendance at the Morgan Heritage Foundation's quarterly review, where Samantha worked. The foundation operated from a converted townhouse. Dylan arrived, early, his heart already racing. "Mr. Baskers?" Samantha's voice came from the doorway. He turned. She stood there in work clothes. Simple, practical. His mouth went dry. She was more beautiful than she'd been at the gala. "Samantha," Dylan said, her name coming out rough. "I didn't know you'd be here." The lie hung obvious between them. Her expression suggested she knew exactly how unconvincing he sounded. "I work here 3 days a week," Samantha said with defensive pride in her voice. "It's honest work." "I wasn't implying otherwise. Weren't you?" She moved into the room, and Dylan's awareness narrowed to her. The way she moved, her proximity making his skin feel too warm. "You show up unannounced at my workplace. Either you're following me or exerting influence." Dylan felt heat rise in his face. "I sponsor this foundation. I'm here for a legitimate review." "A review you've never personally attended before," Samantha pointed out. "How would you know that?" "Because I read the meeting minutes going back 3 years. You were always listed as remote participation." She'd researched him. The realization sent satisfaction curling through his chest. "Fine," Dylan said quietly. "You're right. I came because I knew you worked here." "Why?" Samantha asked. "Because I can't stop thinking about you," Dylan admitted, the words escaping before caution could intervene. "Because that dinner was supposed to be closure, and instead it's been 2 weeks of distraction." Samantha stared, her lips parting slightly. The sight made his heart lurch. The director appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Baskers, we're ready for the quarterly review." The moment shattered. "I should get back to cataloging," Samantha said. "Stay," Dylan said, his voice rougher than intended. "Please." Samantha's eyes narrowed, but she nodded. "Of course, Mr. Baskers." The meeting was torture. Dylan sat through projections while every cell tracked Samantha's position. His awareness of her was acute, almost painful. The way she tucked, hair behind her ear when concentrating, the sound of her voice sending electricity down his spine each time she spoke. When the room emptied, he stopped her. "This has to stop," Samantha said before he could speak. "You showing up, using influence, finding excuses to be near me." "Why not?" Dylan asked. "Because I can't afford complications," Samantha said, her voice holding strain. "I don't have space for whatever this is becoming. What if I want to help? I don't want your help. I want to earn my own survival, even if it means struggling unnecessarily," Dylan pressed. "Especially then," Samantha said, looking at him directly. His breath caught. "The only thing I have left is pride. You taking that would be crueler than any revenge." The words landed, like blows, making his chest tight. "I'm sorry. You're right." "Then why did you really come?" Samantha asked. Dylan's throat went dry. "Because I'm falling for you. Because one dinner wasn't enough and I don't know how to ask for more." Samantha's breath caught audibly. Color rose in her cheeks, and Dylan watched her fight for composure. "I can't afford to fall for you," she whispered. "You're everything I was raised to want, and everything experience taught me not to trust." "So, what do we do?" Dylan asked. She looked at him for a long moment, and the air between them felt charged, electric. "We don't. You go back to your empire. I go back to cataloging." She left, and Dylan stood watching her disappear, his heart racing. That night, alone in his penthouse, Dylan pulled up information on Samantha's foundation. He could fix everything with one phone call, but he'd also prove her exactly right. So, Dylan did something he'd never done. He forced himself to do nothing, to respect boundaries even when every instinct screamed to cross them. Late that night, Dylan admitted what he'd been avoiding. He wasn't falling for Samantha Wren. He'd already fallen. 3 weeks of careful avoidance ended with a storm. Dylan had been working late at the foundation's offices with Samantha, careful partnership that maintained professional distance, while awareness hummed constantly beneath. When the power died, emergency lighting cast everything ghostly blue. "Well," Samantha said, "this is atmospheric." Thunder cracked overhead. Samantha jumped, and Dylan found himself moving toward her. "It's okay. Old building, good bones," he said. "Thunder always startles me," Samantha admitted, wrapping her arms around herself. Dylan noticed the temperature had dropped, her worn cardigan insufficient. "Here," Dylan shrugged out of his jacket, offering it. She looked at the jacket, then at him. Something flickered in her eyes. "That's very gentlemanly." She took it, pulling it around her shoulders. It swamped her frame, and Dylan felt something in his chest constrict at the sight of her wrapped in something that belonged to him. Another crack of thunder. Samantha flinched and Dylan settled on the couch. "Everyone has fears," Dylan said. "My grandmother was terrified of elevators." "What's yours?" Samantha asked. The question surprised him into honesty. "Irrelevance. The fear that everything I've built could disappear and no one would notice. That's incredibly sad. Also incredibly egotistical," Dylan admitted. "Wanting to matter isn't egotistical," Samantha said, moving to the window. "I used to fear irrelevance too. Now I fear mattering. Too much. Having people depend on me and failing them, you won't fail. I already did. My father's foundation is being restructured by someone who cares more about his vision than her own pride." Dylan interrupted. "That's not failure. That's love." She turned to face him, and the look in her eyes made his heart race. "You say things that make me want to trust you." "Why is that terrifying?" Dylan asked. "Because caring means vulnerability," Samantha said, moving closer, each step deliberate. "But you keep finding ways through my walls." "What kinds of things do I make you want?" Dylan asked. "Partnership. Support," Samantha said, stopping directly before him. His throat went dry. "You." The confession hung in the air. Dylan stood slowly. They were inches apart now, close enough that he could see her pulse jumping in her throat, could hear the slight hitch in her breathing. "Samantha," Dylan started. "Why did you bid on me that night?" Samantha asked fiercely. "Give me the truth." Dylan swallowed hard. "Because the second I saw you, every defense collapsed. Because I spent 15 years telling myself I'd stopped caring, and one look proved I'd been lying." "You're terrified?" Samantha's laugh was shaky. "I'm terrified too." Thunder crashed. The storm reached its crescendo. They stood close enough that he could feel her warmth, separated by inches. "I'm not asking for promises," Dylan said quietly. "I'm just asking if you feel this too." "Yes," Samantha whispered. "It's all I think about. The way you look at me." Dylan's chest constricted. "You are—" "Don't," Samantha interrupted, stepping back. The loss of her proximity made him ache. "Don't say things like that when I'm trying to maintain boundaries." "What if I don't want boundaries?" Dylan asked. "Then you're an idiot," Samantha said, her voice shaking. "I wanted to hate you, but you kept showing up, and now I don't know what to do with that." They stared at each other. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, Something equally powerful hummed. "We shouldn't," Samantha whispered. "Probably not," Dylan agreed. "This changes everything." "I know." She looked at him, war playing out in her expression. Then she stepped forward, closing the distance but not quite touching. "This is a terrible idea. The absolute worst," Dylan said. Samantha's hand came up to his chest, resting over his racing heart. The contact sent shockwaves through him. "But I can't walk away. Against every logical objection, it's you I want." They stood like that while the storm raged, neither quite ready to move forward, neither able to step back. Finally, Samantha stepped away. Self-protection, not rejection. "This can't happen tonight. Not like this. But tomorrow, I want to try." "So do I," Dylan managed, his voice rough. Dawn broke hours later. They'd spent the night talking about childhoods and dreams, failures and fears, everything they'd never shared in high school and all they'd discovered since. When morning finally came, they stood by the window watching the city wake. The storm had passed, leaving everything washed clean. "Dylan?" Samantha said softly, not looking at him. "What happens now?" He turned to face her, his heart thundering. This was the moment, the precipice. Everything he'd been holding back pressed against his chest, demanding release. "Now I tell you the truth," Dylan said quietly. "The truth I've been avoiding since that auction." She looked at him then, amber eyes searching his face. "I'm in love with you, Samantha," Dylan said, the words coming out rough, unpolished, absolutely sincere. "Desperately, completely, impossibly in love with you. Not the girl I remembered, not some idealized version I built in my head. You, complicated, brilliant, frustrating you." Her breath caught, but he pressed on, unable to stop now that he'd started. "I love the way you've rebuilt yourself from nothing, with nothing but determination and pride," Dylan continued. "I love your stubbornness and your independence, and the way you challenge me when I try to control things I have no right to control. I love that you refused my help until you were ready, because you needed to prove to yourself that you could survive on your own terms." His hands trembled slightly at his sides. "I love that you made me want to be better. Not to prove something, not to win some imaginary competition, but because you deserve someone who sees you as an equal, someone who respects your strength, instead of trying to rescue you from it." Samantha stood frozen, tears gathering in her eyes. "For 15 years I told myself I hated you," Dylan said, his voice breaking slightly. "That the scholarship kid you dismissed had grown into someone who didn't need your approval. But the truth is, I never stopped wanting you to see me. Really see me. And now that you do..." He stopped, searching for words adequate to the feeling threatening to overwhelm him. "Now that you do, I realize that everything I've built, every success I've achieved, every empire I've constructed, none of it means anything compared to this. To you. To us." "Dylan," Samantha whispered. "I know the timing is terrible," Dylan rushed on. "I know you're dealing with the foundation and rebuilding your life and probably don't need a lovesick billionaire complicating everything. But I had to tell you. I had to make sure you understood that when I bid on you that night, I wasn't trying to humiliate you or claim some hollow victory. I was trying to find my way back to the only person who's ever made me feel like I might be worth something beyond my bank account." The silence stretched. Dawnlight painted her face in gold, turning her tears to diamonds. Then Samantha closed the distance between them in 2 steps, her hands coming up to frame his face. "You fool," she whispered. "You beautiful, impossible fool." Dylan's heart stuttered. "I know. I'm sorry. I love you too," Samantha said. The words hit him like lightning. "What?" "I love you," Samantha repeated, laughing through tears. I've been falling for weeks, fighting at every step because I was terrified. Terrified of needing someone, of depending on anyone, of risking my heart on someone who could destroy me. But you—" her voice shook. "You kept showing up, kept being patient when I pushed you away, kept seeing me clearly even when I couldn't see myself." Dylan's hands came up to cover hers, trembling. "I love how you've changed," Samantha continued. "How you went from someone seeking revenge to someone genuinely trying to be better. I love that you listen when I tell you you're overstepping, that you actually try to respect my boundaries even when it's hard for you. I love that you're not perfect, that you still struggle with wanting to fix everything, but you're trying anyway." Her thumbs brushed across his cheekbones. "I love you, Dylan Baskers. The boy you were, the man you've become, and everyone you're still figuring out how to be. Against every defensive instinct, every logical objection, every fear that's kept me safe. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us." Dylan pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. "I was so afraid," he admitted. "Afraid you'd never see me as anything but the scholarship kid you dismissed." "You were always worthy," Samantha said, her voice fierce. "The boy in high school who was brilliant and determined despite everyone telling him he didn't belong. He was worthy. I was just too blind to see it. But I see you now, Dylan. All of you. And I love all of it." Dylan's breath shuddered out. "So what happens now?" "Now?" Samantha smiled through tears. "Now we figure it out together. We save my father's foundation. We navigate whatever this is becoming. We make mistakes and fix them and probably drive each other insane along the way." "That sounds perfect," Dylan said, his voice rough with emotion. "Terrifying and perfect. The best things usually are." He pulled her into an embrace then, wrapping his arms around her as if he could shield her from every hurt, every fear, every moment of doubt. She melted against him, her head tucking perfectly beneath his chin. And for the first time in 15 years, maybe in his entire life, Dylan Baskers felt complete. Not because of his empire or his wealth or any external measure of success, but because of this, Samantha in his arms, her trust freely given, their future unwritten but shared. Outside, the city came to life. Inside, two people who'd started as adversaries and somehow found their way to love stood in the dawn light, holding each other as if they'd finally found home. "I love you," Dylan whispered against her hair, testing the words, marveling at how right they felt. "I love you too," Samantha murmured back. "And this time I'm never going to stop looking." They stood there as morning painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, two hearts that had been broken and rebuilt finally beating in sync. It was messy, it was complicated, it was absolutely imperfect, and it was everything.